What's up, guys? This is Jack, and today I'm going to be talking about my best films of 2024. So instead of doing like the video essay thing, I'm just going to actually just do a little talk, a little discussion of some of the films that I saw this year, starting from like 22 to number one. I'm gonna go super quickly with like my 22 up to number 10 because I don't want to like make this into like an hour thing. So let's just like run down a lot of the films that I saw this year that are like worthy of your time. Starting with number 22, Daughters, a really good documentary about the incarceration system. Number 21, Memoir of a Snail, really good stop motion animated film from Adam Elliott. Number 20, The Animal Kingdom. I talked about this extensively on my channel. You can check out that video, but it's a really good French sci-fi film. And then number 19, Nosferatu. Really enjoyed this. I saw it twice. First time around, I was kind of like, it's okay. But then the second time around, I felt a little bit better about it. And then number 18, I have The Seed of a Sacred Fig. This is one of the best like international films that you'll see this year. Very abrasive, very just full of life, and just it's really intense. And I'm glad that the director made it out of the situation. Number 17, Furiosa. This is one of the best action films of the year that you'll see. Number 16, Sing Sing. Coleman Domingo gives like one of the best performances of the year, in my opinion. And it's kind of sad that he's kind of like not super into the conversation now since a lot of films have come out. But yeah, it's really good. And then number 15, I have A Real Pain. Jesse Eisenberg's best film to date. Even better than his last film, which was not that good. Don't need to go super deep into that. And then number 14, I have Occupied City, which is a 4-hour documentary about Amsterdam and the Nazi occupation of it. Occupation? My words are kind of like all over the place. Bear with me, I'm sick. But yeah, that documentary was really, really good, and it's certainly the better Steve McQueen movie that came out this year. Number 13, The Last Year of Darkness, another documentary that deeply moved me, and it's all about music and how it connects to other people around China. And then number 12, I have About Dry Grasses, a Turkish 3.5-hour film dealing with a teacher who has to sit through a lot of these dark conversations with other people and his students. Really enjoyed it. It was really riveting. Number 11, I have Dune Part 2. People are going to come at me for not putting this at number 10 or like even like higher, but fuck it. Like, I don't care. Like, it's still a really good movie, but my other like top 10s are just, to me, like they're more emotionally impactful compared to, Dune Part 2. I still commend like the filmmaking with Dune Part 2. I think it's like one of the best like looking and like beautifully directed films of the year. And then let's just get to our top number 10, starting with Bird. So starting at number 10, I have Bird by Andrea Arnold. Yeah, I was really excited to check out this film because I'm a big like Andrea Arnold fan. I've been watching her films since American Honey. I really loved Fish Tank, so her coming back to like the narrative space really was just like a joy. And this film is just, some of her normal stuff that she usually does with the coming of age story, with a main character going through a section of their lives. And then you also have this magical realism aspect, which is introduced early on into the film, with Franz Rogowski being like the bird figure who looms over the main character's mind and just like her world. And I really loved this film because it really kind of like spoke to the generation that's going on like right now, like the TikTok generation, where they constantly are like filming videos of them doing stuff every day. The main character just like walks around East West London just like shooting bird videos and just hanging out with their friends. And meanwhile, this bird character, Franz Rogowski, shows up and tries to like help out this girl become like herself and also learn more about her upbringing. And it's a really emotional film, and I really enjoyed a lot of the kind of warped perspectives between like the Franz Rogowski character and then the main character. And yeah, like it also, again, like Andrea Arnold understands how to create like the sense of magical realism in the film, and also just using like the soundtrack. There's a lot of like heaters in this film. It also uses Fontaine's DC opening up the film, and then there's also a song near the end where it uses the verve as a way to kind of like connect the character character, the main character with the father, who is played by Barry Keoghan, who is kind of like a dad character who grew up in like the 90s, and he's like very grungy, so it makes sense to like play the Verve in that scene near the end of the film. But yeah, this was just so good. I'm excited to see more of like Andrea Arnold, and I think she's one of the filmmakers that I keep on like looking forward to watch like every time she puts a new movie out. So coming out number 9, I have Evil Does Not Exist. This is another one that I was really paying attention to because Hamaguchi directed Drive My Car a couple years ago, and he put me on the map with his filmmaking and his aesthetic. And going into Evil Does Not Exist, this is like completely different from Drive My Car in a sense where it's more about like the natural land and how we treat the animals and like the birds and just the entire environment and the earth. And you have these main characters who are living in the forest and they're taking care of the forest, and then here comes these capitalistic people from the city who come down to these forests and try to convince the villagers that their way of thinking is wrong and they should build this glamp territory, glorious camp territory filled with, you know, diseases and destruction to the earth. And these villagers react in such a way where they tell the capitalist people that if you build these glamps, you will destroy the natural order of the earth. And that's where the film kind of like leads into these stories of these villagers going through these destructive attempts to destroy the earth. And I really enjoyed this film. It's one of the movies that like you have to kind of like sit with entirely, especially when it gets to like the town hall sequence with the two capitalist workers who show up at the village and try to convince these villagers that this glorious camp is going to like work out in the end. And of course it won't. But after that scene happens, the film slowly turns into a very like evil, destructive attempt to destroy the capitalistic system. And I was just riveted throughout the entire film. Where it ends kind of sour, but it also makes sense when you kind of like think about what was happening throughout the entire film. And again, it's very meditative and very emotional, and I love the score. The score is something that I always like go back to every time around I try to like think about the film. But again, Hamaguchi is a filmmaker that I will be looking forward to every time he makes a new movie. And then coming at number 8, I have Substance. Oh man, this movie was just a wild ride. I saw this at TIFF in the afternoon, and it was actually before another movie I was supposed to watch that is going to be shown up on my list pretty soon. But yeah, this was just a joy to watch. I heard a lot of the rumblings at Cannes that this was just an absolute like crazy film, and I followed the filmmaker's film before, Revenge, so I was really excited to see her follow-up from Revenge to this, and it lived up to my expectations, and it brought me a lot of joy. And if you know what this film is about, it's pretty simple. It's about like this aging actress who wants to become young again, and she takes like this liquid that brings her back to youthfulness, but in a very horrific way, because she turns into something that she shouldn't be turned into. It's kind of like the disturbance of the natural order. If you disturb it, it will bring you hell. And yeah, it does bring you hell. Demi Moore's performance is easily one of the best like leading actress performances that I've seen this year. It's very transformative, figuratively and literally. And on top of that, like, it's one of those films that is very like brash with its thematics. It going through the idea of like, oh, if you want to like become younger again, then you have to like face the consequences, and it just beats you over the head with it. Again, figuratively and literally, but it has fun with it. It's very like dark comedy aesthetic, satirical. A lot of the colors are vibrant. A lot of the characters are very over exaggerated, and it totally works in that sense because that's what it is. I think Karsten, he said it really right about like how you show, you know, the themes. It really depends on like how you show it, and if you do show it, like straight up just show it, like be very brash about it. And I think Substance does that. It's very brash and bold. I hate the word brash and bold, but I think that's like how I should have described this film. And Margaret Qualley is also really damn great in this. I have nothing else to say substantially about it, but if you haven't seen The Substance, like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, go watch it. Like, it's so fucking good, bro. And then coming at number 7, I have The Beast, which I think I mentioned this on my best of 2024 list so far video, but I will go kind of like a little bit deeper without spoiling it. This is a film about two lovers who are in the near future where AI is overtaking humanity, and they are a part of this program where they can like AI scan their entire psyche and go back into the past to experience a lot of these emotions of love. And kind of just like the film Kinds of Kindness this year, which also dealt with variable ways of love. This film deals again with variable ways of love, but in different time spans. So you start out with like the 1800s with these two characters who fall in love, and it's a very like fluffy romantic costume drama. And then it transfers to the 2014 section, where you see how love has expanded to this time frame where it's basically transactional, and it's also about male rage in a sense where George McKay's character is a portrait of the incel culture and how it has overtaken the idea of love. And then you have the future, which is the present of this film, where you have these two main characters who are trying to like connect through AI. And the film kind of like transfers between like these three timelines, and it goes back and forth, and eventually it turns into like this horrific surrealist adventure. Like, I don't know how to explain it. It's very, very like original. And I think like this film to me is like one of the best sci-fi films of the year. I know like Dune Part 2 is getting a lot of praise. I know Furiosa is getting a lot of praise. I said The Animal Kingdom is one of my favorite like sci-fi films also as well, but I would put this like way above like those films because this is another one that like really emotionally moved me, and Lea Seydoux' performance in this film does a lot of like great baggage to my psyche. And George McKay, like each section of him, he teeters between very loving to like very like disgusting. And I just really enjoyed a lot of like the stuff that was happening. It turns into like a David Lynch film like halfway through the film when it like transfers to like the 2014 section. And then it just kind of like goes back to this normal sci-fi drama, and then just goes into like a slasher like territory near the end of the film. Like it's like mind-boggling, and I don't know like how to explain it like in like complete terms, but the way I'm describing it, I think if you really want to like experience something that's like very original, The Beast might do your bidding. And then coming at number 6, I have I Saw the TV Glow by Jane Schoenborn. Pronunciations are not my cup of tea, but this film really spoke to me on a very personal level, not in terms of like gender, but in like sexuality and just what the main character Owen is going through throughout his couple years in his teenage life. And this movie, it's one of those films that either you get it or you don't. And I think this film doesn't work for a lot of like older people out here. It definitely works for like the younger generation. But the film is mostly about like these two teenage characters who are really obsessed with this TV show that airs every night, and they become like friends over it. And eventually, once the TV show starts to fall apart, their relationship falls apart, and then it kind of like turns into like this very nightmarish affair with gender and sexuality. And yeah, like this is one of those films that, again, will speak to a lot of the younger generation out here who are struggling with their identity, and how nostalgia will feed into the psyche of your real self, and how we can use nostalgia to attack our own selves, if that makes sense. And I think Jane, her direction is very reminiscent of Greg Araki's films, like his earlier films, most notably Nowhere and Mysterious Skin. but it also plays a lot with like David Lynch surrealism, where there's some scenes where you don't know if this is actually happening or not. And then you have Justice Smith's character Owen, who is going through multiple stages of just denial of his self or their self. And you also have Bridget Lundy Payne's character, which is also dealing with the same thing. And eventually where the film ends, I don't want to spoil it, but it ends, first of all, when you really think about it, it ends pretty sour. But if you really think about it, it's probably like one of the most beautiful endings that I've seen this year, because I think it's more of like an open like self idea of like this character going through all these like emotions and then eventually realizing who they are. And it ends in a very positive way. I know people can perceive like the ending as like a negative way, but I see it more as a positive way. But that's kind of like the small spoilery thing about the film. But the rest of the film is just, it's very like soothing. I don't know, like soothing's not like the good word to describe this film, but I think if you watch it again and again, like it starts to become very like relaxing. And I really enjoyed the two performances in this. I know Justice Smith has been kind of like shitted on the internet, but I think his performance works here in terms of like the dry, deadpan delivery. And that dry, deadpan delivery works in his favor in the titular bleachers scene in the middle of the film, where it literally explains the motive of the film. And if you did not pay attention to like that scene, you were just like, whatever, then yeah, you're not going to like this movie. But I think after that bleachers scene, the film turns sinister, but also in a way where it totally makes sense to collapse the notion of these characters. But yeah, I think this movie, it's one of those movies that will stand the test of time and is definitely one of the better like alternative films that you'll see this year. And then coming at number 5, I have The Brutalist. This is a film that I saw recently a couple weeks ago, so I still have it like fresh in my mind. But this film, it's another one where it impacted me emotionally because of like its filmmaking. Brady Corbett, I've been following this dude since Fox Lux, and he jumped up from like Fox Lux to like The Brutalist in such a way where I was just like, wow, this dude is going to be one of the best filmmakers working today. If you don't remember what The Brutalist is about, it's about an architect who transfers from Poland to America after World War II and starts from the bottom all the way up to the top, where he is trying to build a community center for these religious people in Philadelphia. And he meets up with this oligarch type character played by Guy Pearce, who wants to help Adrian Brody's character build this community center. And from here, like the beginning of the film starts out as the typical American dream film, where you see the immigrant hopping out of Ellis Island onto American soil, and he is trying to learn the American language and the feeling of America, but is constantly being shitted on because he is an immigrant. Once Guy Pearce's character shows up, the film turns into a spectacle of imagination and emotions, and mostly about like the tortured artist and how an artist has to like destroy themselves to get what they want. And yeah, like this film is just emotionally impactful. It's like 3 hours and 30 minutes filled with just beautiful cinematography, filmmaking, acting. It's shot on 35 millimeter. It's on VistaVision. It's like something that we haven't seen in cinema for like a long time. And Brady Corbett like keeps attention towards the material at hand, and he doesn't like go away from like any of like the baggage of these main characters. It's very focused, and the 3.5 hours flew by quickly, even with like the intermission in the middle. And Adrian Brody puts, I think, like one of the best performances of the year and his career. And I would say the same with Felicity Jones and Guy Pearce and Joe Alwyn and also Alessandro Novella. They all like put on like really gargantuan performances. This is coming out a little bit later in January as I'm recording this video, but if you're in the New York, LA area, just check it out. Go in blind and just experience the the flow of The Brutalist. And coming at number 4, I have Anora. This is another film that I saw at TIFF, and it was immediately after The Substance, so I was like really high on The Substance. And I was just like, oh man, I can't wait for Anora. I hope it's really good. And yeah, it's so damn good. The reason why I have this at number 4 is because I think in the middle section of the film is kind of like turns into a screwball comedy, and it can get really grating and tiring once it starts to repeats itself over and over again. But then once the screwball comedy tones down and you see Anora played by Mikey Madison, who is incredible in this film. I've seen her in Scream, I've seen her in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but this is like a star-making role for her. And once she realizes that she doesn't have what she wants, the film turns into kind of like this very like dark and depressing character study of the American dream. It's another idea of the American dream. You have like The Brutalist, which is about the tortured artist in the American dream, and you have now the modern American dream with influencers and sex workers who are working beneath the American dream, the faded American dream, and they're trying to like work themselves up and live a really normal life. But anyways, you have Anora, who wants to marry this Russian oligarch teenager, and the marriage doesn't work out, and the film turns into an idea of like, oh, you can't get what you want. Now you're going to have to suffer. And once Nora realizes that, the film turns into like a dark, depressing character study of the American dream. And then you have your Borsov, Igor, who is like in the background the entire time. He's kind of like very quiet and emotionless. And once his character study turns into more of a forefront like type of person, if that makes sense, the film turns into like a very like meditative and like quiet film about like these two characters who are just like trapped in the American dream. And man, like the last third of this movie really makes the movie, and where it ends is just one of the best endings of the year. And Sean Baker knows how to like end his film, starts his film. He knows how to like establish like everything. He knows how to establish the plot, the characters, just like the tension, and then he definitely knows how to like end his movies. Like I think this is one of his better like endings. I always go back to, you know, the Florida Project ending being like his best ending, or like the Red Rocket ending, but I think the Nora ending is like the perfect like Sean Baker ending of his entire filmography so far. But yeah, like I love this movie. I will be watching it for years to come. It's one of my favorite comedies in the last 10 years. If you haven't seen Anora, do yourself a favor, check it out. So now we're at the top 3 best films of 2024. And I'm going to start with The Nickel Boys. This is a book I actually read a couple months ago. I've been reading a lot of books that are being adapted into films so I can like kind of like get ready for myself for the movies that are coming out or came out this year. And this was one of them that I really wanted to like check out because I heard the book was really, really good. And yeah, I can confirm the book is so fucking good. But it's also very emotional because this is a film and a story about a private school in Florida where they basically abused these kids, these black kids, and it's during like the Jim Crow era, and a lot of these students were unfortunately killed by their adults in the school. And the film itself pays attention to the 2 stories that happened in the school. But what's also really interesting is that the film is shot in a first-person point of view. So the entire movie is between these 2 main characters and their first point of view of the situation at hand. And normally you don't really see a lot of films that deal with like this thematic in such a heavy way, let alone a first-person point of view. Like, I've never seen a movie that does that before. But here, its gimmick is not actually a gimmick. It's actually very intensive and emotional, and it works in its favor. Ramel Ross, I've seen his documentary before a couple years ago, and I was like completely captivated by his documentary filmmaking, and he kind of applies it here with The Nickel Boys, but in more of, not such a sensationalist way, but more of a dramatic way. and you're dealing with like these two boys played by Ethan Hesse and Brandon Wilson, and both of these main characters are bonding over like the abuse of the school. And eventually the film kind of like transfers itself out of the school and into their adulthood, where these two main characters are suffering from a lot of the abuse that happened at the school. And the filmmaking is just, it's so fucking beautiful. It's very emotional. And even then, like, once you understand that like the abuse happened, it doesn't really show the violence, which is really, really good because it's PG-13, and you don't see any like blood or like any like beatings or anything like that. It's implied, and there is a scene where you see one of the boys who are getting like tied up to like a heater in a shack, but you don't really like see it. You only hear like the heater going like in and out of like the sound mix. But the rest of the film is just, it's very like subtext or subtle with its abuse thematic. And man, it was just a really powerful film to watch. Another film that I think, I don't really like to throw like it's a masterpiece or like, oh, it's an instant classic, but it's one of those movies that like, of course it's going to be like shown in history classes in elementary and like middle school and high schools. And it's one of those films that like, I understand a lot of like the main like general public will like not like this film because of the way it's filmed with its first person point of view, but I think if you really pay attention to what it's trying to say and how like the film is trying to like portray its themes of abuse and just brotherhood, if you get past like all those like, you know, hurdles, the film really is very emotional and just beautiful to like take in. And also Anjune Ellis Taylor's performance is noteworthy because there's a scene where she hugs one of the brothers or one of the main characters in the film, just like their sibling, because the other sibling is on the other side of the school and she can't get to her sibling, so she has to like hug it out with another person. And it's a whole thing where, you know, the main character is trying to get a perfect hug and kind of like have that like hug as a feeling to bring towards this other person that she doesn't know. And it's just a beautiful scene. And there's also another scene where she's doing like this monologue, a scene in front of the camera, and it's just very like video gamey, but like it's not like it's supposed to be that way. It's more like very like in the moment. And I just loved that, like these two scenes in the film. But yeah, like Nickel Boys, incredible. It's coming out a little bit later in January. I highly recommend it. Definitely one of the films that you should be watching in theaters, not at home. But just, yeah, really powerful film. So these last two films, they are very intertwined and are directive towards a director that has been cooking really, really well for the past couple years. You already know what it's going to be because these last two films are films that have really spoke to me in a lot of ways, and I don't know how to explain it because it's very predictable, these last two films that I put on as like my best films of 2024, because if you know me, like, you know these last two films I'm gonna like pick out. So number 2, I have Challengers, and number 1, I have Queer. You already know like where I'm at with these two films. Like, if you've been following me on my YouTube channel and like my letterbox, I've been like talking about these last two films extensively for the past couple months, annoyingly, to the point where, you know, people were just like, yo, shut the fuck up, like stop. But you know what, fuck it, like these last two films are one of the best films of like 2024, but like also I think it's a testament of like how you can like push out like these last two films like in the same year with like different styles and different like thematics, but like they're all like together. Starting with like Challengers, if you don't remember, or if you aren't like paying attention, like you're just like, what the fuck? Luca Guadagnino, director, Italian director, one of the best like directors working today, in my opinion, has directed like so many goddamn good movies. And like every year or every couple like years, he just shows up, he drops a movie, he does like the best shit, and then he just like dips out. And this is like a year where we were graced with like two Luca films. One of them being very like vibrant and just loud and like energetic, and another one being very like emotional and just emo. But the reason why I have Challengers at number 2 is because I've exhausted the fuck out of like this film to the point where I've seen this film like 4 times. I've seen it like way too much, and I was thinking of watching it today just to kind of like see if I can really like pull out the film again and make it like either my number 2 or number 1. But I'm just like, fuck it, like I've seen it way too much. But like a lot of people have said like, oh, this is like the most fun film of the year, but like they put it in like a number 20 or number 30. I'm just like, what the fuck? Like, be true to yourself. Put this at like number like 2 or number 1. Like, straight up like put it like in your top 10. Like, don't like do like a shadow bomb and be like, oh, like it's one of the like funnest film of the year, number 20. Like, nah, bruh. Challengers is just like one of the best films of the year. One of the most like funnest like experiences that I had like in theaters, and like each time around like I watched it in theaters for like I think like 3 times in IMAX Dolby, and then at home, and then at home again. It's just, I don't know, it just really like brings me up. And if you don't know the story, it's a love triangle. It's about like these 3 people who are really obsessed with tennis, and they go through just life, and as they get older, like they become like less and less attuned with like tennis and more about like themselves. But they already lost themselves because they are already like paying attention to tennis, and like they were all about tennis and tennis and tennis and tennis and tennis. And then, you know, once this love triangle becomes, you know, whole, and then it kind of like spreads out and then comes back, and it's just, it times jumps between like their past selves and then like their future and their present, and it just like jumps around. And then the only way like they really communicate with each other is through like a tennis match, and like that tennis match feels like a sex act, because most of the movie, it's not, you know, about the sex like actually in bed. It's more about like the sex on the field, if that makes sense. But yeah, like Challengers is just, it's joyful like watch, and I would take back like any of like my mind and just go like, oh shit, like I want to watch this again for like the first time again. Like it's so damn good. Zendaya, she really won me over. I've watched her since Euphoria, and I really enjoyed her performance in Euphoria, but this puts her on another level. Mike Feist, I've been following for like years, since his like stage times, and now he finally is a leading man, and I'm happy he's finally like here to stay. And especially like Josh O'Connor, who's having a really good year. He was also in La Chimera, which I saw in 2023, but a lot of people finally saw him in this year with La Chimera. And with like La Chimera and like Challengers, he's just like one of the best young actors working today. And his performance in this is just like next level shit. I talked about this film extensively on my channel. I don't need to go super deep into it, but yeah, Challengers is number 2. And number 1, I have another Luca film, which is Queer. Boy, this movie just, it's very, again, how do I explain it? It's very predictable in a sense of, you know, knowing me as a person. I had another, you know, queer film last year that really spoke to me emotionally. That was like my number 1 film, which was All of Us Strangers. And this is kind of like continuing that legacy of like All of Us Strangers to Queer, where you follow this older man who is battling his sexuality, but also is trying to become, you know, himself again. But he's also dealing with like this younger self played by Drew Starkey. And together, Drew Starkey and Daniel Craig put on like, I think one of the most transformative performances that I've seen this year. And one of the performances that have stuck by me, even past like the screening that I saw at TIFF. And man, like Daniel Craig, I've seen him in a couple films like way past like, you know, the James Bond movies, but here he puts on like his career best performance as like this older man who's obsessed with drugs and obsessed with telepathy and obsessed with just picking people's lives, but not himself. He's not like himself throughout the entire film. He's just, you know, being angry and angsty and just disgusting around other people. And then eventually when he figures out that he can like take this drug, the ayahuasca drug in Mexico, in the Mexican jungles, that's when the film transfers itself into a film about like the body and like how we try to like pay attention to the body and like how it's not like in ourselves. I know I'm like getting like super heady and like pretentious, but this film like really spoke to me on a very like metaphysical and just personal level, especially as someone who has done these substances before. Once you take it, it opens the door to another universe within yourself. And Queer is by far one of the most innovative films of the year, and I think Luca really paid attention to William Burroughs' life. I read the book, and the book ends in a very like abruptive way, and where the film kind of like leads into the Mexican jungle section, it starts with Lee taking the ayahuasca drug and experiencing himself, and then eventually the film ends with him realizing what he did. And yeah, I don't want to spoil what happens at the end, but I think kind of like relating to Queer and Challengers as like the two pieces together of like Luca Guadagnino's filmography or film style. Like he really committed himself to making these two different films, but like they all feel like connected. And yeah, like it was just a really passionate film, a film that like I will visit like for years to come. Like I know a lot of people who have seen it kind of like dismissed it or were just like, oh, it's fine. But I think once we like get past like this 2024 year and like into the future, I think people will go back to Queer as like one of the better Luca Guadagnino films of 2024, and like his filmography in general. I think it's going to be like a cult classic, even when like Luca retires, which I don't want to like think about. But I think once it's all said and done, I think Queer will stand out as one of the best like films of the year and one of the best Luca films of his career. But yeah, that's like my number one. And number two, Challengers, and then Queer. So you have two Luca films. That's like fucking amazing. So yeah, that's my top 22 of 2024. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Yeah, I'm just like completely messed up right now with like the sickness, the cold, and just, you know, my headspace. But you know what? I did what I need to do, and that's like my top favorite films of the year. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know I did. I had a blast just, you know, talking about like these films. Please share like your top 22 or just like top films that you've seen this year. I know a lot of people have kind of like seen lesser films because, you know, stuff is happening around in their real life. And, you know, I understand people's personal tastes, and I want to like learn more about like what you guys have seen this year. So, you know, drop it down below in the comments. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the year. I'm actually recording this on New Year's Eve, so it's going to be really fun to kind of like edit this video before the New Year comes in. But I hope you guys enjoy this video. Check out my other videos. I'm going to be, you know, talking about the Golden Globes, my final predictions for the Golden Globes, because it's coming out next week, the Golden Globes. I think it's on Sunday, so I got to get that shit out. And yeah, like this is going to be really fun, editing this video and just really like taking in a lot of the stuff that I've seen this year. But yeah, thank you guys so much for just, you know, watching this video, and yeah, peace out.